False news has become all too common on social media. Unfortunately, some members of the community push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think, and this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
Hey there, guys and gals. Hope you're having yourself a wonderful day. Just wanted to share a few key points of today's hearing of Pete Hegseth. And I got to tell you, it was a bit intense at times. Unfortunately, I didn't get all the fun cuts, but I did capture a few gems. So let's start with some opening words from Pete himself with regards to his mindset and his general plan.
I think the first and most important thing we could have done is elect Donald Trump as the new commander-in-chief, because past is prologue. Our warfighters understand what kind of commander-in-chief they're going to get in President Donald Trump, someone who stands behind them, someone who gives them clear missions, someone who ends wars decisively, and the issue of Ukraine was mentioned, and ensures new wars are not started. There was a minor incursion under Barack Obama into Crimea, followed by nothing under President Trump, followed by an all-out assault by Vladimir Putin into Ukraine under the Biden administration. That did not happen under Donald Trump. Donald Trump managed the Taliban. Yeah. Under the Biden administration, Afghanistan collapsed tragically, ending the lives of 13 at Abbey Gate, who we remember every single day, and no one was held accountable for that. Chinese spy balloons were flying over the country. None of that happened under Donald Trump, and our warfighters understand that. So there's no better recruiter, in my mind, for our military than President Donald Trump. My job is to come alongside him, should I be confirmed, and continue to emphasize his emphasis on warfighting, on getting anything that doesn't contribute to meritocracy out of how decisions are made inside the Pentagon. What gender you are, what race you are, your views on climate change, or whether you are a person of conscience and your faith should have no bearing on whether you get promoted or whether you're selected to go to West Point or whether you graduate from Ranger School. The only thing that should matter is how capable are you at your job? How excellent are you at your job? I served in multi-ethnic units in every place that I worked, every place that I served. None of that mattered. But suddenly we re-inject DEI and critical race theory, dividing troops into different categories, oppressor and oppressed, in ways that they otherwise just want to work together. That's why I've pointed out before, and I'll say it again, and because I'm sure it'll be quoted to me at some point, the dumbest phrase in military history is our unity is our strength. No, our shared purpose is our strength. Our shared mission is our strength. We are one DoD community of all committed to the same mission. Has nothing to do with your background. Has to do with what your commitment is to the country. And that is my solemn pledge to every single person that would put the uniform on and reflects President Trump's priorities as well, Senator.
Yes, absolutely. It does. And I've got to admit that what he's saying really does make sense. But, you know, talking about polar opposite here, not making sense. Next up is Senator King.
Uniform Code of Military Justice, we are going to unleash warfighters to win wars so that wars don't drag on forever, as our generation has seen.
So are you rejecting Title 18 and Title 42, I think, also has provisions that incorporate the Geneva Convention and the laws of armed combat? Are you saying that those laws should be repealed? That is the law of the land right now.
Senator, we have laws on the books from the Geneva Conventions into the Uniform Code of Military Justice. And then underneath that, you have layers in which standard or temporary rules of engagements are put into place. We fight enemies also, Senator, as our generation understands, that play by no rules. They use civilians as human shields.
So are you saying
they target women and children?
The Geneva Convention should not be observed?
We follow rules. We follow rules, but we don't need burdensome rules of engagement that make it impossible for us to win these wars.
You're saying two different things. You're saying we follow rules, but we don't have to follow the rules in all cases. Is that correct?
Senator, I'm making it important tactical distinction that warfighters will understand, that there are the rules we swear an oath to defend, which are incredibly important, and this committee understands and helps set them. And then there are those echelons above reality, from, corps to division to brigade to battalion, and by the time it trickles down to a company or a platoon or a squad level, you have a rules of engagement that nobody recognizes. And then it makes you incredibly difficult to actually do your job on the battlefield. That's the kind of assessment and look that an Army major will give to this process if I was confirmed to be the Secretary of Defense.
Your quote is
true understanding of that.
Your quote in 2024, our boys should not fight by rules written by dignified men in mahogany rooms 80 years ago. That would be the Geneva Convention. America should fight by its own rules, and we should fight to win or not go in at all. Are you saying that the Geneva Convention provisions, which clearly outlaw torture of prisoners, should not apply in the future?
Senator, how we treat our wounded, how we treat our prisoners, the applications of the Geneva Conventions are incredibly important. But we would all have to acknowledge that the way we fought our wars back when the Geneva Conventions were written are a lot different than the asymmetric, non-conventional environment of counterinsurgency that I confronted in Iraq and Afghanistan. I was the senior counterinsurgency instructor in Afghanistan. My job was to understand how the Taliban and Al-Qaeda operated so that NATO units coming in could be informed of what was happening. They knew our rules of engagement, and when they were more restrictive, they took advantage of them, and it put our men and women in a more dangerous and difficult place.
And you believe
For future wars we fight, we need to have someone atop the Pentagon, sir, who understands how those ripple effects
Well, I just want
impact
to
the men and women
understand
in
your
uniform.
position. Your position is torture's okay. Is that correct? Waterboarding, torture is no longer prohibited given
What does this man
the circumstances
have
of whatever war we're in. Is that correct?
Senator, that is not what I said. I've never been party to torture. We are a country that fights by the rule of law, and our men and women always do. And yet we have too many people here in air-conditioned offices that like to point fingers at the guys in dark and dangerous places, the gals in helicopters in enemy territory who are doing things that people in Washington, D.C. would never dare to do, or send, in many cases.
In one of your interviews, you said they're willing to do this. You're talking about Donald Trump and Senator Cruz. They're willing to do something like waterboarding if it's going to keep us safe. Are you okay with waterboarding?
Senator, the law of the land is that waterboarding is not legal.
So the statement that you made, you now recant. Is that correct? They are willing to do something like waterboarding if it's going to keep us safe. You expressed that with approval.
Senator, I'm very familiar with that as a concept, having spent a year at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, guarding 700 of those that attacked us on 9/11.
I just want to be clear. Are we going to abide by the Geneva Convention and the prohibitions on torture, or are we not? Is it going to depend on the circumstances?
As I've stated multiple times, the Geneva Conventions are what we base ours. But what an American first national security policy is not going to do is hand its prerogatives over to international bodies that make decisions about how our men and women make decisions on the battlefield. America First understands we send Americans for a clear mission and a clear objective. We equip them properly for that objective.
All right,
we give them everything they need, and then we stand behind them with the rules of engagement that allow them to fight decisively to defeat America's enemies, which is why we say.
I just have a few seconds left, Mr. Hegseth, if you could. I was very disturbed in your opening statement where you talked about the priorities that you have. We will work with our partners and allies to deter aggression in the Indo-Pacific from the communist Chinese. There's not a single mention in this statement about Ukraine or Russia. Is this code for we're going to abandon Ukraine?
Senator, the president, that's a presidential level policy decision.
Yes,
He's made it very clear that he would like to see a end to that conflict. We know who the aggressor is. We know who the good guy is. We'd like to see it as advantageous for the Ukrainians as possible, but that war needs to come to an end.
You talk a lot about deterrence of China. I would submit that Xi Jinping is watching what we do very carefully. If we abandon Ukraine, that would be the strongest signal possible to Xi Jinping that he can take Taiwan without significant resistance from this country.
Thank you, Senator King.
What the hell is that about? Dude, if, first off, we're not the ones fighting the war in Ukraine. It's the Ukrainians against Russia. And in addition to that, now the North Koreans have their army in there. It's ridiculous. And I just don't understand. Thank you, Senator King, for for your concern for the use of torture, waterboarding to be specific. We all understand how important it is to be to treat your enemies with dignity and love, just as they would do to us, right? What a joke. And he is a joke. And I really don't understand his train of thought or who he's trying to really impress. That was not good. But next is a lovely Senator Warren, a.k.a. Pocahontas. And of course, she's going to be taking advantage of the camera time in order to appease her constituents, which I hope she truly is doing, but I just have no idea how her constituency would be asking about this, and this would be a concern. But that is a whole other discussion, though. But here we go.
Thank you for your service. So if you're confirmed as Secretary of Defense, you will oversee our military, including about 250,000 women who currently serve on active duty in the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Space Forces, and the Marines. And I have serious concerns that your behavior toward women disqualifies you from serving in this role. Now, I've been trying to get answers from you for quite some time on this. You haven't wanted to meet or to answer any of my questions, so we'll just have to do it here and dive in. I want to pick up on some of the questions asked by Senators Shaheen and Gillibrand and Hirono, and I just want to make sure we have a list of some of the facts that I think are undisputed. I'm not going to talk about anonymous sources. I'm just going to quote you directly. We've got the video. We've got it in print. So going back to January 2013, you told a Fox News interviewer that women in the military simply couldn't measure up to men in the military, saying that allowing women to serve in combat roles would force the military to lower the bar. You picked up on that same theme in 2015, making remarks on Fox News, referring to women in combat as, quote, it would erode standards. June 2024, you said on Ben Shapiro's podcast, quote, women shouldn't be in combat at all. And then, of course, we've talked about it in 2024. You published a book, and you say on page 26 of your book, we need moms, but not in the military, especially in combat units. Page 48 of your book, you claim that women should not be in combat roles because men are distracted by women. And then 10 weeks ago, you appeared on the Sean Ryan show and said, I'm straight up just saying we should not have women in combat roles. Now, I presume you recall making all these statements?
Senator, I'm not familiar with the article you're pointing to in 2013, but it underscores my argument completely, because in that 2013 argument, I was talking about standards. Standards are what it's always been about,
let's not have this same fight again.
Always been about Senate
I've quoted you directly. We've got the video. We're happy to show it. But I want to be clear here. For 12 years, you were quite open about your views, and your views were consistently the same. Women are inferior soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen, and guardians. And in case anyone missed the point, and these are your words from 10 weeks ago, women absolutely straight up should not be permitted to serve in combat. And I notice on each of these quotes, those are said without qualification. It's not by how much you can lift or how fast you can run. They don't belong in combat, period, or your words, straight up. And then on November 9th, 2024, just 32 days after your last public comment saying that women absolutely should not be in combat, you declared that, quote, some of our greatest warriors are women, and you support having them serve in combat. Now, that is a very, very big about face in a very, very short period of time. So help me understand, Mr. Hegseth, what extraordinary event happened in that 32-day period that made you change the core values you had expressed for the preceding 12 years?
Senator, again, I very much appreciate you bringing up my comments from 2013 because for me, this issue has always been about standards. And unfortunately, because of some of the people that have been in political power for the last 4 years, priorities other than standards, lethality, and meritocracy have driven decision-making.
I'm quoting you from the podcast. Women shouldn't be in combat at all. Where is the reference to standards that they should be there if they can carry, if they can run? I don't see that at all, Mr. Hegseth. What I see is that there's a 32-day period in which you suddenly have another description about your views of women in the military. And I just want to know, what changed in the 32 days that the song you sang is not the song you come in here today to sing?
Senator, the concerns I have and the concerns that many have had, especially in ground combat units, is that in pursuit of certain percentages or quotas, standards have been changed. And that makes the combat more difficult
let me make a
for everybody
suggestion
involved.
about what happened in that 32 days. You got a nomination from President Trump. Now, I've heard of deathbed conversions, but this is the first time I've heard of a nomination conversion. And I hope you understand that many women serving in the military right now might think that if you can convert so rapidly your long-held and aggressively pursued views in just 32 days, that 32 days after you get confirmed, maybe you'll just reverse those views and go back to the old guy who said straight up, women do not belong in combat. Now, Mr. Hegseth, you have written that after they retire, generals should be banned from working for the defense industry for 10 years. You and I agree on the corrosive effects of the revolving door between the Pentagon and defense contractors. It's something I would have liked to talk with you about if you'd come and been willing to visit with me. But the question I have for you on this is, will you put your money where your mouth is and agree that when you leave this job, you will not work for the defense industry for 10 years?
Senator, it's not even a question I've thought about because
You can
it's
think
not
about
one
it right now.
It's not one, my motivation for this job
I understand
has never
that. I
been
just
about
need
what
a
could
yes or no
conceivably
here.
come next.
Time is short. I just need a yes or no.
I would consult with the president about what the policy should be
In
at the Defense
other
Department.
words, you're quite sure that every general who serves should not go directly into the defense industry for 10 years. But you're not willing to make that same pledge?
I'm not a general, Senator.
You'll be the one, let us just be clear, in charge of the generals. So you're saying sauce for the goose, but certainly not sauce for the gander?
I would want to see what the policy of the
Oh, I'll
president is.
bet you would.
Thank you, Senator Warren.
General Mr. Hegseth.
Yes. General
Thanks.
Hegseth got himself a
Thanks for
promotion.
being here today.
Yes, thank you for joining and really making a splash too. General got himself a promotion all of a sudden, but I really don't care for Pocahontas and her politics. She seems extremely disingenuous and most definitely out for herself. So it's ridiculous. But next up is General Gary Peters.
I've heard about the jobs you've had in the past. Let's just talk about qualifications. I know you had 2 previous positions. How many people reported to you in those positions?
Senator, at Vets for Freedom, we were a small upstart. Our focus was
Just the number,
working
please.
on Capitol Hill, going back to the battlefield to
Just the
support
number.
warfighters.
Just the number, please.
We probably had 8 to 10 full-time staff and lots of volunteers.
So you had 8. Has there been any other? We've heard about the 2, and certainly there's been a lot of talk about the mismanagement, et cetera, et cetera. I'm just curious. I won't go into that. Just curious. So you had 8 there. What's the largest number of people you've ever supervised or had in an organization in your career?
Not 3 million. Senator.
No, I don't expect that. Very few people have ever had that experience, but how many? It's a straight up question.
I think we had over 100 full-time staff at Concerned Vets for America, roughly, with thousands of volunteers.
So 100
I was
people.
also a headquarters company commander, which would have been
Okay, that's fine.
a couple of hundred. So
Couple-
nothing remotely near the size of the Defense Department.
Right.
I would acknowledge that.
Actually, not remotely near even a medium-sized company in America, let alone a big company in America, especially a major corporation. And we're hiring you to be the CEO of one of the most complex, largest organizations in the world. We're the board of directors here. I don't know of any corporate board of directors that would hire a CEO for a major company if they came and said, I supervised 100 people before. They'd ask you, well, what kind of experiences you had? We need innovation. Can you give me an experience or your actual experience of driving innovation in an organization? Give me an example of where you have done
Oh
that.
my goodness, Senator, absolutely. At Concerned Veterans for America, we created the Fixing Veterans Healthcare Task Force, a bipartisan task force that never been done before, to create policy, to drive policy change on Capitol Hill that organizations fought ferociously against. We got the VA Accountability Act passed and the Mission Act passed in a way that a nonprofit of our size, veterans organization, has never done. And that's testified in all the letters that we put forward to the committee, which are on the record.
I have limited time. Thank you for that. Give me an example of where you've driven down cost. I've heard examples that Senator Blumenthal gave. The cost was a real problem for you in your 50-person organization that you actually raised a lot less than what you actually spent. Did you drive costs down? If in a 50-person organization, let me tell you, we've got to drive costs down dramatically in an organization of 3 million people and hundreds of billions of dollars. You don't have that experience that you can talk about. To me, this is or acquisition reform. Acquisition reform, you bring that up. Have you had experience in acquisition reform?
I've written about and studied on acquisition reform.
Have you actually done it?
Because what we need in the hands of our warfighters better change, because we're not doing it well right now.
It better. And we need people who have experience actually doing. Again, I'm going to go back to CEO of the most complex organization in the world. I don't think there's a board of directors in America that would hire you as a CEO with the kind of experience you have on your resume. You talk about standards. You talk about raising or lower. We have a problem of standards in the DoD, and we have to raise standards for the men and women who serve. Do you think that the way to raise the minimum standards of the people who serve us is to lower the standards for the Secretary of Defense? That we have someone who has never managed an organization more than 100 people is going to come in and manage this incredibly important organization and do it with the professionalism and has no experience that they can tell us that they have actually done that? I have real problems with that. This is not about other issues that are brought up. They're all very important. I'm just about trying to get things done, managing efficiently, and having the best people who have demonstrated that in a large organization. And I'm sorry, but I don't see that in your background. There are a lot of other things you can do very well. You're a capable person, but you have not convinced me that you're able to take on this tremendous responsibility with a complex organization and having little or no significant management experience.
Senator, I'm grateful to be hired by one of the most successful CEOs in American history, should I be confirmed.
Yes.
Mr. Hegseth, it seems to me that you've supervised far more people than the average United States senator supervises typically.
Wow. Thank you. And Pete just cracks a little smile there. He cracks a little smile, but that was a great way of wrapping that up. It lightened up the mood and also just showed you just how wrong he was. So I don't get what he was trying to get at. Yes, it is a valid question, but why is he bringing up his resume now? It just seems that his being part of this board to hire Pete, for his jobs, as he says, why is it a matter of him doing nothing more than making Pete a spectacle, rather than really being productive? You do have to love how it ended, though. It was great. But now I'm going to close on this one, which I think is a positive note. I really do dig it.
I'd like to submit for the record signatures by 32 members of the House of Representatives who are veterans. The signatures call on the Senate to honor the constitutional duty of advise and consent by conducting a fair, thorough confirmation process that evaluates his nomination solely on the substance and merits. His distinguished military service, academic credentials, and a bold vision for revitalizing the national defense. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record.
Without objection.
There's a lot of talk going about talking about qualifications and then about us hiring him if we are the board. But there's a lot of senators here I wouldn't have on my board because there is no qualifications except your age, and you got to be living in the state and you're a citizen of the United States to be a senator. Other than the fact we got to convince a lot of people to vote for us. And then when we start talking about qualifications, for if you're qualified for it. Could the chairman tell me what the qualifications are for the Secretary of Defense? Mr. Chairman, could you tell me what the qualifications are for the Secretary of Defense?
I'd be happy
I'll read it.
for you to do that.
Yeah. Let me read it for you because I Googled
I
it.
was getting some advice from
I
my
understand
second
that.
in command.
Yeah, but I'm just making a point because there's a lot about qualifications, and I think it's so hypocritical of senators, especially on the other side of the aisle, be talking about his qualifications, not going to lead the secretary or be the Secretary of Defense, and yet your qualifications aren't any better. You guys aren't any more qualified to be the senator than I'm qualified to be the senator, except we're lucky enough to be here. But let me read you what the qualifications of the Secretary of Defense is, because I Googled it and went through a lot of different sites, and really it's hard to see. But in general, the U.S. Secretary of Defense position is filled by a civilian. That's it. If you have served in the U.S. Army Forces and have been in the service for, you have to be retired for at least 7 years, and Congress can weigh that. And then there's questions that the senator from Massachusetts brought up about serving on a board inside the military industry, and yet your own secretary that you all voted for, Secretary Austin, we had to vote on a waiver because he stepped off the board of Raytheon. Mm-hmm. But I guess that's okay because that's a Democrat Secretary of Defense. But you so quickly forget about that. And then Senator Kaine, or I guess I better use the senator from Virginia, starts bringing up the fact that what if you showed up drunk to your job? How many senators have showed up drunk to vote at night?
Ouch.
Have any of you guys asked them to step down and resign from their job? And don't tell me you haven't seen it because I know you have. And then how many senators do you know have got a divorce before cheating on their wives? Did you ask them to step down? No. But it's for show. You guys make sure you make a big show and point out the hypocrisy because the man's made a mistake. And you want to sit there and say that he's not qualified? Give me a joke. I mean, it is so ridiculous that you guys hold yourself as this higher standard and you forget you got a big plank in your eye. We've all made mistakes. I've made mistakes. And Jennifer, thank you for loving him through that mistake. Because the only reason why I'm here and not in prison is because my wife loved me too. I have changed, but I'm not perfect. But I found somebody that thought I was perfect. And for whatever reason, you love Pete, and I don't know why. But just like our Lord and Savior forgave me, my wife's had to forgive me more than once too, and I'm sure you've had to forgive him too. And so thank you.
Yes.
So before I go down this rabbit hole again, tell me something about your wife that you love.
She's the smartest, most capable, loving, humble, honest person I've ever met. In addition to being incredibly beautiful. Don't forget about your kids. I'm supposed to talk about my kids?
No, well, she's also the mother.
Oh, an amazing mother.
Yes.
Of our blended family of 7 kids.
Brother, I'm pulling you
which love
along.
her.
I'm trying to help you here. Do you believe that you're going to be running the Secretary or the Department of Defense by yourself?
Senator, absolutely not. Just as President Trump is assembling his cabinet, I look forward and already am in the process of building one of the best possible teams you can imagine with decades and decades of experience
Yes.
outside
exactly.
of the Pentagon, driving innovation and excellence, and also inside the building, knowing how to make it happen. Yes, sir.
So, in your organizations that you did have the privilege of running, did you have a board that you?
In both organizations, we had a board. Yes.
Okay, and what did you do with that board? What kind of decisions did you make with them?
Those boards provided oversight and insight into decision-making.
They all have special, unique sets that maybe filled gaps that you're not the expertise in?
Yes, sir.
So do you believe you're capable of surrounding yourself with capable individuals that you're going to be able to run those same ideas by and surround yourself with people that are smarter and better equipped in maybe areas that you don't necessarily carry those expertise with?
Yeah.
Senator, the only reason I've had success in life, to include my wonderful wife, is because of people more capable around me and having the self-confidence to empower them and say, hey, run with the ball, run with the football, take it down the field. We'll do this together. I don't care who gets the credit. And in this case, that's how the Pentagon will be run.
Let's end with this, Mr. Chairman, about the qualifications. You got a man who has literally put his butt on the line, who served 20 years in the service, multiple deployments, has heard the bullets crack over the top of his head,
Has a Bronze Star.
has been willing to go into combat, been willing to see friends die for this country.
Sad.
And he's willing to still put himself through this. His wife is willing to still stand beside him, knowing he wasn't perfect, knowing that all this was
Yep.
going to be brought up.
Yep.
And he's still willing to serve the country.
Yes.
What other qualifications does he need?
None. None whatsoever. The man is qualified, well qualified for the position. This was an excellent way of addressing those issues that were brought up. Pretty funny too. But guys, I gotta say, thank you all for watching till the end. You know what? I've never been into watching confirmation hearings before, but it was pretty darn interesting. And if anything, it's definitely going to set the tone for future nominees. So don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Show the dog some love and shoots.